passion for writing stories, but you always get stuck on like what your characters are going to do, how they're going to act, what they're going to say. Have you ever wanted to feel like a god, bending others to your will and throwing challenges in the way of people you really don't like? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Maybe you're just looking for a way to burn time with some friends. In that case, I recommend becoming an effective dungeon master. The ability to have an absurdly strong imagination, as well as being able to tell stories, is very valuable, even if you're not planning on playing Dungeons & Dragons, because it's too nerdy. I may not be the most experienced DM with only a single campaign under my belt, but I learned quite a bit over the experience thanks to my brutally honest players. And I now feel like I can give a pretty effective crash course on how to write a story and how to DM. In this speech, I'm going to be going over a template on how to write a campaign. I'm going to give you an example of a pretty good campaign, and I'm going to teach you how to narrate effectively. The template I'll be using is something called the Hero's Journey, which very few of you would be familiar with, I'm assuming, but maybe some of you will. This template was used in Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Spider-Man, and really any other action movie made in the last 40 years. It consists of 9 different steps to use throughout your story. The call to adventure, meeting the mentor, crossing the threshold, trials, special items, the fall, the resolution, the final battle, and the return. So the call to adventure is anything from just being bored and deciding, hey, I'm going to go on an adventure. Okay. To someone killing your dog that your wife gave you to cope with her death. As long as it kickstarts your adventure, it's a good call to adventure. Meeting the mentor, the mentor is supposed to set the players on the right direction. It's supposed to give them hints. Hey, go over here. So it could be just like an informational book they find in some library that's like, oh, there's this item in this place. Find it. Or it could be a crazy desert hobo with a space sword. Crossing the threshold is really just a point where the players officially start their adventure. It's not really any sort of thing you have to write in. It's more of just like, all right, so they meet the mentor and then they start moving on. That's just crossing the threshold. Trials is a series of challenges. So this is where you put your stereotypical Legend of Zelda dungeon crawling, puzzle solving, boss destroying kind of stuff. It can be from dungeons to, well, all right. So trials are just a series of challenges, really. They don't have to be dungeons. So it could be dungeons, of course. It could be just a series of fights. Or it could be, collecting 6 shiny rocks that power a snappy new glove. Special items are some sort of new item that's going to help them on their way. It could be a fancy blue sword with a cool name, or a meaningless ball of lint named Gerald. The fall is when the players finally feel like they're ready to face the final villain. They go to the final villain, they engage in combat, and they get beaten like a Grand Canyon donkey. So this normally means that your players are going to spend the next 2 or 3 sessions being super sad, probably murdering a lot of civilians for fun, doing some side quests, and just farming for experience points. The resolution is when the players rise up from their deep depression to prepare themselves for one final battle to determine the outcome of good and evil in the world, which, translates to real life as in, I'm getting kind of bored of doing these side quests. Let's just finish the campaign. The final battle, pretty self-explanatory. It's the most dramatic fight in the entire campaign, good versus evil sort of stuff, and you need to make sure it's the most dramatic part of the entire campaign or your players are going to be really bored. I made that mistake. And Megan and Max know it. Oh, Max isn't here. Oh, God. The return is basically when peace returns and the players go back to their lives before everything started. Now, in between all these things, you're going to have, free roam, which is where you're going to throw your side quests and all this other crazy stuff your players want to do, like pushing each other down the stairs, or rolling a perfect 20 on a d20, that was a 4, rolling a perfect 20 and making an entire horde of orcs do the cha-cha slide for 12 hours. So, yeah. D&D isn't always serious, despite what some people might think. Now you have a quick template, and here's an 11 p.m. version of a pretty decent campaign, or at least I thought so when I was writing these note cards at 1 a.m. So, you always have to find a place to start your players in the world. I myself tend to go the George Lucas route, which is throw your players in the middle of battle and then pull back on the crazy just a little bit to let the plot shine through. And I'm not entirely sure how to describe it, but it works. So, screw that. Let's just go the route most people do. So we're going to start off our players in a tavern in a treehouse city that we'll call Havenwood. So they're sitting at the bar, getting some drinks, telling jokes, all peaceful, all happy, all before everything goes down. When suddenly an old man with a blue staff bursts through the door, collapses to the ground. The players rush to the aid of the old man. The old man thrusts his staff into one of the players' hands. And he says, take it someplace safe, and then dies. Right as he does so, all these dark soldiers start storming the tavern, SWAT team style, slaying every patron in the bar. After then, the players have received their call to adventure. So they have the staff, and they have this mysterious old man who just died, telling them to take it someplace safe. And now they must deal with the immediate threat, either by running, fighting, or hiding. Heck, the players could just, take the entire campaign and throw it out the window and say, hey, let's just give them the staff. Which brings me to my next point. Never, ever write down your campaign to the very detail. Always leave a ton of room to improvise. Because you never know when your players are going to say, hey, I got this magical artifact. I'm going to kill it. I'm going to break it. I'm going to give it to the villain. And then everything is weird. Okay, so after the players escape the village, they decide, hey, I'm just going to go north to the village of Menth and, get some stuff for the adventure. Because right now they don't really have a heading. All they have is a call to adventure. They need to go do something. And so they go to this village, and with a quick roll of a d20, they perform a perception check, which is basically, hey, use your eyes, know what's around you. And they discover that they're being followed. So they start doing that leisurely walking thing that they know they're being followed, starting, turning into alleyways, trying to shape their pursuer as calmly as possible. Their pursuer starts to run. They start to run. Eventually they get cornered in a dark alley. The pursuer stands at the end of the alley and removes his hood. Their pursuer is not an enemy, but a friend. Barum, the man, explains himself. He says that, the old man from Havenwood and I, we went on this adventure and got this staff, blah, 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 all that stuff. And he explains this newly awoken evil that was released when the staff was removed. So this is oh my gosh, I forgot the word. Okay, so this is where they meet their mentor. This is the person that's going to set them on the right path. So he gives them a hint as to where to go next. So, this is normally where you'd say, all right, you guys have some free roam time, as much as you want until you want to actually continue on this stuff. So after a few side quests, they get bored and they decide to follow the hint, and they travel to something that I'll just call the Seventh Peak. The only entrance to the Seventh Peak is a dungeon under the mountain. The key is the staff, but conveniently, the staff has lost all its power, so they need to go through their trials, go through all these dungeons to restore the staff to power. I'm sorry if this is a bit boring, because, you gotta, sometimes there's going to be boring parts in D&D campaigns. It's not all combat, which is another mistake I made. So they travel from dungeon to dungeon, beating every kind of boss, from the generic evil wizard to, the dragon version of Chuck Norris riding a pogo stick wielding two great swords. So the staff regains power, they enter the dungeon, and inside the dungeon is this massive chamber with a dragon in it. And it's not Dungeons and Dragons without dragons. So after some third-degree burns and a brand new head to mount on the wall, the players finally ascend to the mountain, and they meet these gods, so to speak, who show them the villain that's amassing an army and getting ready to take over the world. They offer to send the players to fight it right now, and, the only way is forward, so they accept. They fight the villain, and, like I said, they get beaten like a Grand Canyon donkey. This is the fall. So the staff is shattered, the players are defeated, and the players resort to the age-old comfort of alcoholism, depression, and becoming really short-tempered with everything around them. Eventually, the players rise up and vow revenge. They decide, hey, if the world is going to die, I'm going to go down fighting. So, after another session of screaming, lucky rolls, oddly inspirational quotes that always come up out of crazy battles like this somehow, and dramatic monologuing, and some epic music, peace returns to the land. The players live out the rest of their lives in comfort and are heralded as heroes. So that's a very generic hero's journey sort of story. Now, despite having a template and a story, your DMing will suck if you can't properly narrate. So, this is going to be a pretty quick one. If you know how to read and you know how to speak, then it's pretty easy. You have the hardest part down. First step is to enunciate your words. I don't mean like this, like you have to do in theater so people can know what you're saying and you have to really over-exaggerate every single mouth movement. Just speak clearly. That's really all this means. Because there's nothing more painful than pouring your heart and soul into a really, really emotional dialogue. And then your players go, "What was that? Oh my, I've run out of time. Oh dear." Alright, use background music. I normally default to Led Zeppelin's Immigrant Song for battles, because, it's good. And develop a poker face, because, as the quote goes, it's already too late when the DM smiles. So it can give away a lot, or it can help your players. Scared. Oh, I've messed up so much already. This is okay. So there you have it. Aside from the basic rules, you're well on your way to creating your very own D&D campaign. These books can be bought on Amazon for about $30, or if you want to spend $50, you can go to a store that sells them. Oh, now you know a good template, you know how to write it, and you know how to tell it to your players. So find yourself a couple of good friends, preferably 5 or less, a book, some dice, and happy dungeoneering. Yay!